So, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuned in from today. My name is Ash Giddings, and today myself and my two colleagues are going to talk to you about how to replace IBM's PM400. Most people call it PM400. We're going to show you an alternative to what was IBM Performance Management for Power Systems. But I guess before we start, we'll do some introductions. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Ash. Tom Huntington, EVP of Technical Solutions at HelpSystems. I manage our worldwide team of pre-sales people across HelpSystems and also an IBM Power champion, so pretty hooked into what's happening around IBM Power with AIX, Linux, and of course IBM I, where we started out. Over to you, Randy.
Yeah, well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you tuning in today. I'm sure most of you, hopefully I've talked to you or spoken to you, a lot of you on the phone. Me and my partner started Mid-Range Performance Group, I don't want to tell you how many years ago, but we've been now part of HelpSystems for over 2 years now. So glad to be working with the team and look forward to our conversation.
2 years. That time's flown, Randy. I've been with, I guess, with HelpSystems and previous incarnations for, I guess, for a total of, it's nearly 16 years now. I keep saying 15 years, but it's close to 16 years. I'm part of the Common Europe Advisory Council and have been involved in IBM I pretty much since day one, mainly on the systems management side of things. So, what are we going to talk to you about today? Well, Performance management for power systems has been discontinued. This was effective September 30th this year. Customers received a notification, or so we're told, in June of this year, but it still appears to have come as a shock to many, leaving them very little time to find a viable alternative. Now, this solution covered power systems platforms, so IBM I, AX, Linux, predominantly IBM I believe. And in years gone by, PM400, as I'll call it today, otherwise it's quite a mouthful, PM400 used to be able to receive physical reports through the post once a month, but for some time now, this has been an online model. If you're unsure if you use PM400, this is the look and feel. Here we have on the green screen here. I'm sure this will be familiar to many. PM400 uses collection services data, which runs and is collected efficiently and nicely in the background and populates a number of physical files in QUsers, I believe. These files are prefixed QAPM asterisks, and because the data is spread across multiple files, an ever-increasing number of files, it can make it harder to see and use in other tools. And although I've shown a green screen here, you can configure collection services from the browser, from Navigator for I. Randy, I know you've worked in this area for a number of years. Anything to add?
No, I think it's a good summary. Certainly, the important thing here is the collection of historical data. And that's obviously one of the benefits that the service PM400 provided, right? It stored that data for you because, in order to do any kind of trending analysis, capacity planning, it's not necessarily a 100% requirement, but it's really, to do a great job, you really need historical data. So now the question is, without this PM400 service, the main question is where are you going to store this data, and how you're going to analyze it? So there's kind of a two-part question there, but I think it's a good summary.
Brilliant, and we'll cover both of those topics and more today. So let's start by the agenda. We'll start by talking about historical data, your historical data. This is the data that dates back weeks, months, probably years. And I consider this data gold dust, real gold dust. It can tell you so much about your server and your applications. And the more you have of it, the better decisions you can make going forward. Next, we'll discuss what happens from this point onwards before we dissect your options, your immediate options. We'll then talk about how maybe you can use the demise of PM400 to your advantage before finishing off with some ways you can actually use this data for other reasons outside of the monthly reporting that PM400 delivered. If you have any questions at all today, please use the Q&A feature in GoToMeeting, and with a bit of luck, we'll have some time at the end and we'll be able to tackle some of those questions.
Very good, Ash. So we do ask polling questions throughout our webinars, and our first polling question that we're hoping you can take an answer, because it makes the webinar a little better, is how do you aim to replace the PM400? You can tell a Brit wrote that. I don't think we would say that in the US, but anyways, how do you aim to replace PM400, Ash? With Performance Navigator, manual processes, replacement with a third-party software, no plans to replace it. It's something that you just weren't looking at anyways, maybe, or maybe you just don't know. So for those who don't know and don't really have any plans or are thinking manual processes, we'll show you what we can do to help automate that process today and make sure that we can continue to deliver on that historical information without taking up too much space. So let's see here. It looks like we've been open for a minute. We hate to move things along very fast on you, but I'm gonna have to close the poll out. And looks like the high number here is, if I can share that to everybody, is that 56% don't know, 6% have no plans to replace it, 14% are looking at third-party type software outside of Performance Navigator, 3% are thinking manual, guys, and 20% already own or probably own or are thinking about Performance Navigator. So awesome, good to know. All right, so let's hide the poll here and move on to our next slide. Ash, you want to keep moving them forward then?
There you go,
all
Tom.
right, so yeah, thank you. So the historical collection data that's been going on for years is technically your data, and I don't want to spend too much time on here because really the service has gone away. It really wasn't something that came out of, I'd say IBM Rochester per se. It was managed by a different group within IBM as a service. And as they've stated, it will be your historical data should be available for you still, but they haven't really stated how long and what format will be available to you. At some stage, we make the assumption that the access data will change, and you're going to really, if you need that data for any future capacity planning or whatever the reason may be for, certainly for sizing systems, we depend on it all the time. So this data may no longer exist in the future. So our recommendation is if you can still access it and get it, you should really grab that data today. So then if we move on to the next slide and in the agenda, what happens to today's data and tomorrow's data? And the reason we say that is if you go to the next slide, you can still technically upload this data. Ash went into our PM400, turned it on. We had never used it before after September 30th, and it's still accepting data. But I quite honestly, and amongst us talking about it, we really don't think it's a good idea to continue to do this because IBM has made it pretty clear with their statement of direction on this technology. Okay.
Yeah, spot on, Tom. So really, what are your options going forward? Well, what used to be a pretty much fully automated service in PM400 where you probably did very little other than take an occasional glance at the reports. As I see it, you've got three options. You've got IBM Navigator for I, browser that IBM kindly provide. You've got another third-party tool, and you've got Performance Navigator, which we're going to share with you today. I guess there is another option. There's always do nothing. But as I've already mentioned, this historical data is so important, not just for reporting, but also for capacity planning and probably more importantly, performance analysis. So really make sure you use it to your advantage. So let's have a look at these options. So, okay, so the first option really is free. It's Navigator for I. It's free, but again, it's my opinion, but for reporting purposes, I found it somewhat limited. To use Navigator for I, simply point your favorite browser at your system, port 2001, sign in, and you'll see the tree shown on the right here. Now, one thing to make you aware of, something that happened in 7.3, IBM introduced graph history and historical data capabilities. And note, this is turned off by default and needs turning on. As you turn it on, you'll need to state how long you want to keep both detailed and summarized historical data for. The choice is yours at that point. So IBM Navigator for I, if you go into that tree that I just mentioned and go into performance and graph history, you'll be able to see something like this, historical data. If when looking at the graph, the detailed information is still there, it's not been reduced, you can perform a drill down of sorts into this data. So for example, if you maybe have high CPU, if the detail is there, you can probably identify which jobs were running at that time to help you pinpoint the reason for it. Now the graphs are they're okay. I tend to find Navigator for I really useful. I do tend to find it slow, I guess because it's Java running under the covers, but you know, it's workable. It's worth noting that you can export these graphs, these images, so you can export them as images, CSV or text file. So if you want to really crunch these numbers in another tool, the capability is there. I don't see this as a like-for-like replacement, but you can do some elements that were in PM400. It's also worth noting there's a capacity planning element as well. But obviously when you use that, it takes you outside of Navigator for I and into IBM's workload estimator website. Now, with Navigator for I, every partition you have to manage and report on needs to be handled individually. If you want to produce a similar report across all of your partitions, you'll need to browse to each LPAR, sign into Navigator for I, and do the same multiple steps, potentially every month or whatever your measured period is. There's no enterprise reporting, and you can't report across your whole estate. It's a very manual approach. There's no way of having graphs produced for you automatically, or at least I'm not able to find one. You can't have them produced automatically at a regular cadence. And because you have to perform the steps on every LPAR, it can be time consuming or quite time consuming compared to PM400. Certainly not what you've been used to. PM400, as far as I'm concerned, was pretty much set up and forget. And I would imagine many people had forgotten they'd got that set up.
Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of it, Ash, really was, it is, you know, we're big fans of automation. As much you can do to automate things is awesome.
Yeah. I think the Navigator for I piece, I think the reporting piece is probably its Achilles heel. The ability to maybe drill in and to produce reports is okay, but it can be its Achilles heel. Chaps, anything to add to Navigator for I?
No, yeah, this is, I mean, it's a great tool. I kind of view this as a great tool. I put it in I call it a problem determination bucket because it's accessing the same data that we are. So all the data is there from collection services. Now, again, we talk about it's not just about managing, you know, we're talking about IBMI here, but you know, we're talking about not just managing an LPAR. We're talking about managing a frame. We're talking about managing the power frame, which also could obviously exist in a lot of cases exist of at least a VIOS server and maybe an AIX server and maybe Linux. So you need to not only look at managing things at the LPAR level, you know, from a ongoing or management reporting point of view, but also from an enterprise or a frame level or a virtual shared pool level, or there's many different ways to look at this. So it's just not just an LPAR by LPAR looking at data, unless you're doing problem determination. Obviously, if that's what you're doing, you have to go do that, right? So it's multiple steps that you know, you need to ultimately consolidate all this data into some sort of management reporting format, and that's sort of what PM400 was doing for you.
Yeah. And we're going to show that today, right? So
correct.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, let's move on, Ash.
Yeah, so I guess second option is a third-party tool or another third-party tool. Realistically, to find a like-for-like replacement, you're going to need some kind of third-party tool. These tools need to be able to talk IBMI and gather, I guess, a non-standard data split across a number of files residing in queues as this, produced by collection services. I think that limits the choice somewhat with regards to third-party tools. So when exploring third-party options, it's worth considering where this data will reside. PM400 data was stored on an IBM server somewhere, which, as we said, you're likely to lose access to it at some stage. You don't really want to run that risk again. I would prefer to have that data at hand so I can touch and feel it. I can back it up when I want. If I was to lose it, I could restore it back. It's so valuable, that data. But let's get to the chase. Tom, talk to us about the HelpSystems offering Performance Navigator.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. And I think, you hit on something right there at the end. It's longevity in the marketplace. One of the things that Performance Navigator has to its, success is that it has been around for many years, and really, to a certain extent, the team from MPG was responsible for a lot of what you saw in the performance management tool. So Performance Navigator is a tool that is used by many of the business partners and large customers around the globe already today to help with management reporting and problem determination and drill down capabilities. Yes, and if you want to go on to the next slide, we can talk a bit more about that. The fact that we have acquired MPG. We did that 2.5 years ago now, and Randy, it's been great working with your group, and we've made it part of the robot product line. But quite honestly, we haven't really done changes to the look and feel of the product because it was already a great product. It's a graphical tool that gives you the ability to run from your IBM Power systems and be able to grab the information and have that historical information, which is really the key thing. It also supports other Unix platforms besides IBM AIX. We can also bring in data from HPUX and Oracle environments if need be. So with the tool, we're going to support end user functions like capacity planning, performance analysis, power analytics, management level reporting. Randy talked about the importance of being able to see not only a IBMI partition, but all your IBMI partitions, all your AIX partitions, your Linux, and the VIOS, all on one summarized report. And then if you do have any problems out there, we can take a look at the before and after and help automate the process of finding what's changed. A really neat process that's inside the product that's just built in. So, but it takes history. Randy and I talk about the fact that, you got to have the history in order to solve the problem. And this is a tool that's been used by many organizations around the globe. So, Ash, back over to you.
Yeah, so what does it look like, Performance Navigator? Well, it's a simple IBMI install. It's about a 13 meg save file. It uses collection services data as an input. So we're using the same data as PM400. And Performance Navigator was really designed to keep years worth of historical data with almost no overhead and very little disk space. I think a year's worth of data is around 70 meg. As I say, it uses collection services data that resides in QMPG data or QPFR data, and it reduces it, not only reduces it reduces it dramatically every day. Also, it's not just used for reporting purposes. Many customers use the tool to conduct problem determination, capacity planning, to help ensure they receive no surprises. You can also use this on AX and Linux using the nmon data, and VIOS too, Randy, is that right?
Absolutely. And we use nmon for VIOS, but we actually, when we run our install script, we recognize that it's a VIOS partition, and therefore we collect different statistics, sort of like NPIV, your shared Ethernet adapter statistics, and so forth. So even though it is under the covers AIX, it is obviously a specialized partition, so therefore we turn on some different flags in nmon so that we can grab that data.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, Performance Navigator is a mature product, as Tom mentioned. It's used by customers, partners, MSPs, and cloud providers over the globe. It enables you to produce PM400 type reports, plus many, many more across your whole estate. In addition, as you'll see shortly with Randy's demo, you can use this data to pinpoint issues, understand the impact of change, and see what your workload will look like on different configurations, whether that's for an on-prem capacity plan or whether you're looking to use it increasingly popularly to migrate to the cloud. For reporting, you can also brand these, and as I say, you can literally keep years and years worth of data. But should we just be looking to replicate PM400? Does this give us an opportunity here? So PM400 hadn't really changed, as far as I can see, for the last 20 years or so. And while some of the graphs produced were of use, many weren't, and I felt they were a little dated. So how can you report really on what's useful for you? Wouldn't it make sense to use this this unexpected opportunity to really think about what you'd like to report on? So let's take a little look. I would recommend starting with a clean sheet of paper and think about, in an ideal world, what you'd like to report on. Forget about PM400 almost. What you'd like to report on for you and your business. What reports will help you perform your job better or more efficiently? What reports could you produce that would help you, your superiors, or your business make better decisions? Once you've arrived at that point, decide which period you'd like to report over. For example, if you're a managed service provider and are producing a report for one of your clients for a monthly review, I would suggest maybe a daily representation. And remember, with Performance Navigator, you can always drill into that daily data. Next, think about your audience. If the recipients are management, be sure to include a management summary. People will just flick through the first couple of pages and look for some nice green on them. And finally, and this steer comes from your reporting period, work out the best day to produce these reports. If it's a monthly report split by days, run it on the first of the month. But really, the first point there, what is important is the key thing. What do you really want to report on in this day and age? And Randy, take it away. I think you're going to give us a demo. You're going to show us how to produce PM400 style reports.
You bet. Let me just make sure you're gonna make me the presenter.
Let's have a look. There we go.
Okay, show my screen. There we go.
We can see your screen.
Yeah, everybody. So Ash, you made a couple of good points. I think obviously we're talking about in this particular webinar about quote, how do you replace quote PM400, what it was doing for you. But as you mentioned, this is a good time to think about what else should we be doing other than what PM400 did, which was a great service because again, it kept the history. So again, the most important part is you need to have some strategy to collect history, whether that is, as you mentioned, a Navigator for I or a third party or us. Somehow you need to have this data. Secondly, you need to have whatever choice you need to put that format in is some way to what you're going to do with it. How are you going to analyze it, right? And we're going to show you obviously what Performance Navigator does with this, right? So as you can see, this is a Windows interface. This is I call it a fat client. There's over 100,000 lines of code here. So this client does a lot of math, and there needs to be a lot of math in reporting or analyzing. So it's not just about creating a graph, it's also about analyzing a graph or analyzing the data to give management some insight as to what's going on. As you can see here, this is, I am connected to well over or close to 1,000 machines. And the reason is we at HelpSystems, along with IBM TechLine and so forth and business partners, we do a lot of capacity planning services. We do a lot of problem determination services and so forth. So I get lots of data and I get to look at data. That's kind of what I do all day long is look at this data. But I wanted to real quickly for those to show you exactly how we manage the historical collection, because I think that's important. So on an I, if we do this very simply, as Ash mentioned, we're basically using collection services data. No, it's not I want to say we're using the same data. But the way we do that is we put these jobs on the job scheduler, and it's very straightforward. And this is the most important job. This is called data reduction. So that job basically wakes up 30 minutes after midnight, analyzes this data, and updates our history file. It runs about a minute, 2 minutes on a big machine maybe. It's a batch job. It runs in QSys Nomax. We're not going to interfere with anything and so forth. These other tasks are, I'm going to say, miscellaneous things. We do track disk space and IFS space. I mean, there's other things we do, but this is basically how we manage that historical collection. And the main thing is that not only, as Ash mentioned, is keeping the historical data, but obviously managing the space that it consumes. A lot of people assume because we have years of data that we're taking up lots of room, and that's the whole point of the data reduction job, is that we don't take up that room. And if for the same thing on AIX, except obviously, or maybe not obvious for those who may not be familiar with AIX or Linux, we use the cron tab. And you can see when you install us, we put these entries on the cron tab. And it's the same fundamental concept. Every day we take existing nmon data. So we wake up, in this case, we wake up at 4:25 in the morning, we take yesterday's nmon and we consolidate it into a single file. Now there's no database over here, so the access to the client is different. When we're accessing the data for we're using ODBC. When you're accessing the data from any AIX Linux BIOS, you're going to be accessing it from some centralized mapped disk, that you can get access to. But the fundamentals are basically the same. We're going to manage the historical data without chewing up your disk, and certainly from a CPU standpoint, there's really no overhead. So then you wind up. Yes, sir.
This would run on VIOS too, right? I mean, that's the same process you'd run crime. Okay.
Exactly. And by the way, Linux, any form of Linux, Power, x86, mainframe on Linux, it doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, we also collect, for those who may have some AC 922s or IC 922s, or for that matter, x86 machines with GPUs, we collect GPU data. Because again, our job is to try to help you manage either the power infrastructure, or in the case of x86, to manage that infrastructure. But we're also obviously trying to do what, again, we're going to show you what do we do with this data once we have it, right? And so there, by the way, the host code that you're looking at we just showed you on both the AIX and the IB is free. So downloading, and then the client, first of all, is free. So this Windows client, you're going to see it. This is the client itself is free to download. The host code is free. So collecting the historical data is free. So I call it the movie camera. We want you to start the movie camera recording and have this data so that if and when you need it, for whatever reason, you have that data there. So then I wanted to show you what do you get for free. So let's kind of walk through the progression here. So with the client, we do give you some options that you get free, and it's like, this is the tree, so to speak. So you do get access to what we call for it's going to be, and by the way, for AIX, it's a CPU user and sys graph, but it's a priority graph. And you can see right here, I'm looking at a graph by date, right? So this happens to be the average CPU utilization per shift. And so this might be familiar with those with PM400, right? Because it tracks shift data, right? And as you can see, we had data going way back on this machine. And actually, I have data that goes back actually further than this. And because it's a client, there's a lot of ways to zoom in and zoom out and so forth, right? And this is by date, right? But if I wanted to look at it by week, I could do that. If I wanted to look at it by month, I could do that as well. This is we also track, this is something called the uncapped available. So this has to do with understanding the Power VM virtualization. So this depends on how your desired and virtuals are set. We can either track that or not track that. As you notice, I just turned it off because I didn't, in this case, didn't want to look at it, right? This happened to be one of our test machines, so it's not, it's very low utilized here, but so you can see it's only like 5%. graph here. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you, these are trend lines. So one of the important things is trending. And this is one of the things that PM400 did for you, right? You can actually extrapolate this trend line. And what I just did here is based on, you can see based on about 9 months worth of data on my machine, I'm having an annualized 10% decline. So again, you could get this data for free for this graph, CPU, right? Now I'm gonna go down to the date level because this is by week, right? And I'm actually gonna drill into the time level. So there's 4 levels, month, week, date, and time. I'm gonna drill into the time just to show you. And look what happened, something happened right there. And you can get this by time level, you can just kind of walk backwards, right? So I'm just walking backwards through the time once I'm at the time level. And as you can see on this machine, I'm collecting in 5-minute intervals. So this is one of the graphs that you get for free, right? And you can do I think the important thing to note is you can get the trending analysis with it as well, right? And of course, what are you gonna do with it, right? And as Ash mentioned, sort of like Navigator for I, you can save this as a JPEG. You could save it as a CSV if you wanted to put the data in this Excel spreadsheet for some reason. You could email the graph somewhere, but that's going to be a JPEG, right? So that's sort of what you would do with it, with the free one, right? You also get disk space utilization, you know, how full your disk is. And it's the same thing. You're going to drill up, you're going to drill down, you're going to look at your space. As you can see, periodically we do some disk reductions and so forth. So my space is actually declining at a 2% annualized growth. Again, this trend line, you can see I can choose what time frame I want to do my trending analysis on, right? So as you can see, as I adjust that number over there dynamically changes, right? So that's one of the other things you get for free. The third thing you get for free with the client is what we call a health check. And the way you run this is through this power analytics, management reporting, daily health check. Now, if you don't have a license for the product, this health check option is going to be up here in this main menu. That's how you know. As soon as you enter any kind of a license to the product, it moves down here. But I'm going to show you what happens here. So this is also free. So when we talk about daily health check, we're really talking about yesterday, right? So, and this is something that I'll show you what the look and feel is. So this is an example of this machine that was taken a couple of days ago. And you get the choice, by the way, when you run this, whether you want to analyze the whole 24 hours, or maybe I want to analyze just 8 to 5, for example, right? But this goes through and shows you basically, you know, your average, your CPU, your peak CPU, your average CPW, your disk, average disk, response time, machine faulting, faulting factor, and so forth. And as you can see, we have some metrics over here, and we do have guidelines there are default guidelines, which you can change, but the idea here is to say, hey, that metric happens to exceed best practice guidelines, right? And of course, best practice, like I mentioned, could be depends, right? So you do have the option. We have, based on our experience, we've set these as defaults, but certainly you can change those based on your environment and so forth. So, and if you really were curious to know, well, I wonder what that really looked like, you can click on that and you can see this is the 24-hour picture of yesterday. And if I wanted to look at the peak, what it does, it zooms in on when that peak happened, and it happened at 10 minutes after midnight is when that peak happened. So that's sort of what the health check would get for free, right? So that's the collection is free. You get these 3 functions, a couple of graphs, and you get this daily health check. And by the way, all of the production of these things can be automated. And as a matter of fact, I'll show you how you would automate that health check. So when you do automation, we call it a report set. So if you edit report sets is what we call it. With the latest version, by the way, which is if you download this client, and it's going to be, the latest version is 19.2a, you are going to get, you will get some predefined report sets, and they're going to be called PM400 AIX, health check, interactive monthly report, and then non-interactive report. So these predefined report sets are already in that latest version. Now, of course, if you have an older version, if you're a customer today, you can certainly go create these today. We just help you predefine them, right? So I wanted to show you, well, what happens. So with a license, you now can get something that's really close. I'm gonna call it the next step that sort of simulates what you would get with the PM400 report, and that's a monthly report. So this is an example.
Randy, you're gonna, just to kind of give you a break. So up to this point, this stuff is all free. It's part of the product. People can download it and have access to it. The next pieces are a cost item, right? And that's the piece
Correct.
to replace PM and to do things like drill into the details under something like this health check report.
Correct. So this required, okay. This is the license piece of this, right? But this is sort of, if all you're looking to do is, let's say, replace that PM400 report, this is our equivalent. It is going to be different. As Ash says, it's going to, the look and feel is different, but it basically is going to cover the same thing, right? So this is an example.
So let's go ahead and do that. So we don't run out of time today, Randy.
Yep, I'm trying to get through this. We have a lot to cover. That's all right. So
that's a hint.
Yeah, exactly. You got the specs here, and I'm just going, in order of time, I'm going to show you just the CPU because it repeats itself. So basically, we're going to show you what your average day looks like, and it's sort of like just like PM400. So this is an average from the month of October. So let's say you, for the sake of argument, this right there. If I looked at 31 days in October and I looked at 10, 15, the average was 15% busy. So obviously it's consistent. This is sort of your profile of what your workflow looks like, right? So this is the average for this. And then we give you the trending information. So this is a monthly view. So you have not only the graph for going back a year, and you have the numbers over here for people who can, so you don't have to quote read the graph. So this pattern repeats itself. So you just different metrics, right? So now you have CPW, you have disk response time, 5250 response time, you have space utilization, you have ARM utilization for your disk, you have number of jobs, you have transaction, you have faulting rates and so forth. So a lot of the same information you saw in the PM400 report, and again, this can be produced on a automated process. And again, as you can see, it all generates HTML, right? The same thing happens with AIX. It's same thing, but it's obviously, now we're talking about sys and user and same thing, look and feel. But the look and feel is the same regardless of whether it's that. This is an example of the health check for AIX, which is the free thing, right? So these are all the things that you might do if you're thinking about just replacing PM400. But obviously from the client standpoint, there is a lot of things you can do well beyond that with a fully licensed product, right? Again, as Ash said, it may be a good time to think about what else do I need to do, instead of just replacing PM400, what else is there to do? Ash, you want to go back to the PowerPoint just in the...
Yeah, fantastic. I think what you show us there, really, Randy, you need a proper demo. We need to set you loose on proper demos where we maybe have 50 minutes or an hour, so you can really show the power of the product. Just limiting you to 10 minutes is never a good time. But
yeah. So as you can see, there's a million. I mean, literally, there's over 1,000 graphs. I mean, if you count them. So there is a lot to this stuff, and again, all of it can be automated and produced and analyzed to help you produce stuff for management.
Yeah, and Randy, really, this is kind of like the admin console, right? So because you can generate, so if you have management reporting that you're looking to replace, all that can be done into an HTML format, so it looks modern. You can give people access to that. You put it somewhere out in your network, and that's kind of the intention there, right?
Correct. That's what most of our customers do, is they automate this. And then when somebody sees, like they're looking at Ash's, if you see something red, your manager may call and say, well, what's going on there? And just because your CPU peaked at 100% may not, it's worth you looking into, but it may not be bad. I mean, technically speaking, there's nothing wrong with the CPU going to 122% busy, right? unless the phone rings or unless the job that you need to get done doesn't get done on time, right? So, but it's certainly something worth looking at. So what would happen is this report would get created automatically. Somebody looks at it, let's say the manager looks at it, and they're going to call the IT staff and says, well, can you investigate what's going on there? And of course, with the product, you could actually figure out exactly who did what to whom.
Awesome. Ash, are you back on the slide deck again?
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so this is an example. What he's, obviously we not only do we track all the hardware, but we also track every job and every user, and we create a profile of the resources consumed. And we do this at a month-to-month basis, and we do it at the interval level, and we can summarize it for the last 90 days. So this gets into problem determination and how, again, figuring out who did what to whom. And, without this history, you really can't, the most often asked question we get when we get the phone call is a batch job used to run an hour, now it runs 2 hours.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't have any history, you're not going to figure out the before picture. All you know is it runs 2 hours now. And we can figure out why it runs 2 hours, but what you can't figure out is what changed because you don't have any history. Again, another reason that, history is like invaluable. Every day you goes by, you don't collect history. It's like burning history books.
Yeah, it's pure gold dust. The fact you can use this not just for reporting, but you can really drill in. And this is, I think this is a drilling example, identifying a spike and drilling into that spike and see what was running at the time. Incredibly powerful. As a techie, this is the kind of stuff that I absolutely love. Absolutely love. Tom, I think we're back to you to talk about kind of problem determination and drill down, really. I think Tom may have disappeared. He's been having internet.
Okay. He may have an internet problem, but I can, we often get asked, again, when you see something on a management report that's, approaching a guideline or above a guideline, it's important to be able to do problem determination. And again, we can do this. You can do this with Navigator for I. I mean, that's what its strong point is because the data is there. It's just a matter of knowing where to go and how fast you're going to get there. I have often say, it's easy to create a graph. Sometimes it's difficult to analyze a graph. So, being able to point and click and get to something quickly is one thing. Trying to figure out where to go is another, right? So there's multiple issues in a problem determination, and I sort of approach all of problem determination as a process of elimination, right? Is it the CPU? Yes or no? Is it the disk? Yes or no? Is it memory? Yes or no? So you sort of go through a process of elimination, and then you get down as low as weights, right? Collection services has job weight states in I. By the way, on AIX, if we have AIX people on the phone, obviously that's processes. We keep track of top processes with nmon, right? We turn that switch on by default, right? And we can tell you what process is consuming the CPU at any given interval and so forth, from a top point of view.
Got you. And this is something I found invaluable, actually, or I would find invaluable if I run a production environment. Luckily, I don't have to anymore. Is kind of what's changed. To kind of pick 2 points in time. I didn't have a problem this time last week. I have a problem today. Kind of what's changed. And this is the kind of information you can get out of this historical data. The fact we can see, hey, there were 7 new jobs at the same time this week compared to last week. Maybe they are a good source of, or a good starting point to analyze. So
this is sort of the problem. This is the before and after type of analysis we're talking about, right? Yeah. What changed? And exactly. So something happened. What? And again, having historical data, we go through that analytic process to figure out, well, here's all the top jobs that were on that day, and here's all the top jobs. And as you can see, there's new ones that show up. They, possibly, it is a puzzle. It's one of the pieces of a puzzle to say, hey, something's different. Let's go figure out, why those jobs weren't running last week and they are now, and so forth.
It definitely gives you a good steer. Also, on the flip side as well, where's my disk space going? It's being chewed away. What's chewing it away? So you can get this level of information. And all of these columns that you see in here, this is the IFS, all of these columns that you see in here, you can sort by these. So you can look for the size changed, what's changed the most. And typically, you know, that will be your starting point. But again, using this data, you can also use it for capacity planning. We can keep months, years worth of data without chewing up too much disk space. And we can see the journey that we've been on with our applications and our workloads with regards to resources such as CPU, disk, memory. You can quickly and easily extrapolate measured items and see when things are going to break or when you're likely to hit thresholds. We've looked at,
you bring up a good point there, Ash. One of the great benefits of having Performance Navigator history is obviously this capacity planning function here, because not only do we at HelpSystems use it if we provide the services, but IBM Techline business partners around the world use this data for capacity planning. So it's really nice when they're doing a capacity planning or we are doing it for you. If we had 6 months, a year's worth of data versus only having the last 7 days or 10 days worth of data, it gives the.
I think it really helps you I know your workload. It's a bit cheesy, but it's kind of knowing your workload and knowing where maybe you had a spike, but maybe it's not really a spike you need to be too worried about. Maybe it's a one-off spike, and that's often key for capacity planning. I'm just going to bring up a next screenshot in the kind of interests of time. So I guess once you've spoken to the business and your application team to understand what changes are planned, you can translate this into simple, detailed, complex percentage type changes over a desired period. And again, extrapolate that and see what that looks like. See what that looks like going forward. And as you can see here, we've said that we're going to grow. We've put some percentages in, and as the arrow indicates, we've got ample growth. We can grow 15% each year for the next 3 years, and we've still got plenty of headroom in here. Something else you can do with this data that we're collecting is you can drop that workload onto different architecture or different hardware, and you can see what it looks like. I want to drop it on, maybe I'm thinking about moving to the cloud, or maybe I'm thinking about buying a new box. What does my workload look like, and how long will that last me? Randy, how do we get started?
Yeah, so after everybody who signed up for the webinar, you will receive an email with download instructions. Again, it's a simple download for the Windows client. When you install the Windows client, the only thing that happens is we put an icon on your desktop. First time you start the program, it will prompt you to install the host code, whether that's AIX, VIOS, Linux, or IBM I, and it walks you through the steps. For IBM I, basically it's the same thing. You're going to download a save file, create a save file, FTP it, restore it, and install it. On AIX and VIOS, it's a tar.gz file. You're going to FTP it up there and run an install command. So it's really straightforward. It takes about less than 5 minutes to do on a partition, and so you will get an email with those instructions. And then obviously you can take advantage of the free stuff, and then we certainly encourage you to schedule a web meeting with us to give you a walkthrough of, for example, how do we automate the free stuff? How do we automate, let's say I want a license to create the monthly report or to create some of the other hundreds of things we can do with the report. We can give you a walkthrough of that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Randy. So let's summarize Performance Navigator. It uses collection services data or nmon data. So it uses free data that's being collected nicely and efficiently. There's a powerful data reduction process. So this data doesn't occupy too much space. You can download the product today, use it free of charge for CPU and disk utilization, and you can run a daily health check, all free of charge, all without a license. It's a mature product. It's used by both customers, business partners, HelpSystems, and IBM's Techline, both for capacity planning, problem determination, performance analysis. You can use it for, I guess, your frame or your whole enterprise, not just single partitions. There's a layer or a whole layer of management reporting with the ability to report on and drill down into literally dozens of metrics. We've only covered 2 or 3 today, but there really are dozens of them. You'll have access to HelpSystems 24/7 support, plus our online self-help portal. And really, I guess to summarize, Performance Navigator can help you pinpoint anomalies, optimize system performance, perform trend analysis, while all the time helping you to protect your investment. Tom mentioned at the start, it's part of the robot product line. Download it today, start using it without a license key, and see what value you can really get with the solution.
Now, Ash, I wanted to mention, I do see a lot of questions, and because we're running out of time on here, I just want to let everybody know we will follow up with everybody who asked a question, and we'll answer your question individually. But now, Pat, for this last poll question, go ahead, Ash.
Yeah, hey, Ash, I'm actually back now.
Okay.
So I'll take care of it for you guys. How can HelpSystems help you? We always want to be able to help you out. Certainly schedule a demo of Performance Navigator. Start a free trial. You can just go ahead and download using Randy's instructions that he provided. You want more information about professional services? We certainly can provide services. Some people just collect the data and leave it run, and then we do a service engagement with them to help them out when it comes to reporting and sizing. That's certainly, or problem determination. Or you'd maybe like to just schedule a little technology update with HelpSystems and learn more about everything else that we do besides automating performance collections.
He's gone again, Randy, I think.
He is. Yeah, Tom is having internet trouble. But I think we do have some results. Ash, you got anything else to say? I appreciate everybody's attention today and attendance, and we will follow up with everybody. We're still getting updates on that last survey question, so maybe another 15 or 20 seconds.
We can leave it a few more
Ash,
seconds.
do you have anything else?
We'll take a couple of questions. I know we've overrun. I knew we'd overrun. We should have made it an hour. Randy, maybe you could take a couple of these. Can you schedule the reports, or have you got to run them manually each day or each month?
No, the way we automate the production, as you saw, there's a report set, and we basically use the Windows Task Manager. And
Okay.
you just schedule Performance Navigator to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and run a report set. That's how we automate it.
Got you. So we can act like PM400 did, set and forget, pretty much.
Correct.
Fantastic. And can we report on weights?
Yes. So there is a whole, collection services, fortunately, does collect all these job weight profiles. That's one of the wonderful things about, the IBM I operating system, right? And in collection services, we actually have a graphical interface over the raw performance data. We don't keep the weight profiles of jobs historically. Again, it's sort of a problem determination, but when you see a problem with a job, then you would go into our graphical interface over the raw performance data, which has the weight profile in it. And so with 2 clicks of a button, you can get the weight profile of any job. Fantastic.
Now, there are lots of other questions that we haven't got around to today, and that I apologize for, but I will follow up with you individually in the next day or so. So that you get answers to those questions. So it just leaves me to thank you for your time today, and thank you, Tom and Randy, for your knowledge once again.
Thanks, everybody, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you all for joining us again yet on another HelpSystems webinar. I'm sure there's one going on next week. I forgot what our topic is, but we'll see you again in a future webinar.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.